Public leadership is more than explaining just the leaders who hold public office. While it certainly includes that, the notion of public leadership has expanded to be considered in a much more inclusive and a much more meaningful way. Brooks and Grint tell us that public leadership now includes collaboration across organizations and agencies who are committed to working together based on their shared goals and aims. What are these goals? Well, my friends, these goals are expansive. They've been geared towards sustained social, environmental, and economic well-being. Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to The Communicative Leader, hosted by me, Dr. Leah O'Million-Hodges. My friends call me Dr. O. I'm a professor of communication and a leadership communication expert. On The Communicative Leader, we're working to make your work life what you want it to be. When we think about public leadership, we all likely have very different reactions, different thoughts, different visuals that come to mind. For some of us, these might be warm and positive feelings associated with the term public leadership, and for others, well, it might be a different story altogether. But here's the thing, my friends. Public leadership encompasses a whole slew of leadership roles and activities, ranging from your local PTO, right, the parent-teacher organization, and HOA, the homeowners association, all the way up to the federal government, the United Nations. We're thinking about international relations. This is why this area tends to elicit such varied reactions. So considering the vast differences in public leadership, how the heck do we tie these roles together? What are some of the communicative activities that unite them? Well, let's put this really simply. Influence, right? So whether you're a member of a local chamber of commerce and you're trying to gain support for your new Dining in the Streets initiative, or if you're the president of the United States, in order to be successful, you need to be able to influence the attitudes and behaviors of your constituents. How do we connect with various stakeholder groups? How do we affect change? How do we sway opinions? Well, we integrate persuasive communication with elements of public relations, impression management, credibility, for example. You might be thinking, what the heck am I going to do with PR as a leader, or as a manager, or as a member of my HOA, my student organization? That is not my job, not my area of expertise. Oh, but my friends, so much of your role is public relations. It's considering how to frame or position information, how to get buy-in or support, how to garner volunteers or donations. Public leadership is about finding a way to connect with groups of people and focus on what they care about, what they have in common. This might be demographics, it might be health or financial worries, political beliefs, or social justice concerns. First, I want us to consider some very common PR tasks that leaders and their teams engage in. Then we're going to look at common elements in successful PR endeavors. We're going to chat about relationship management and collaborative or integrative leadership as well. It's this idea of connecting and encouraging collaboration across similar organizations and groups. Finally, I want to leave you with some specific communication behaviors linked to high credibility. I want you to look good, my friend. I want you to shine. So now let's look at leading public opinion through public relations. And here's the thing. We know that public relations or PR, it's gotten a bad rap in the past. Some think of it only as spin, as a way of deceiving or manipulating. But that's not PR. That's just unethical communication. At its heart, public relations is very similar to leadership. Yeah, you heard that right. Like leadership, public relations is about influencing a specific group, about choosing intentional messages that are going to connect with your audience, about establishing and maintaining relationships. Sounds familiar, right? If we're thinking about leading our work group, seeing the PR angle might not be as easy to accept off the bat if we're running for public office, for example. But again, both of these leadership roles integrate PR efforts. So what are some of the leadership efforts that integrate public relations? I want you to think about when you're creating collateral, whether it's a website, an FAQ sheet, brochures, blog posts. any of these materials that we're creating to publicize our company, the community, a group, or governmental events, this is PR in nature. Also, when you're monitoring and interacting with stakeholders, whether this is engaging with them at face-to-face events, whether they're on the premises or on social media. Relatedly, creating and maintain relationships with your stakeholders, from your employees to your customers to other like-minded organizations. You might also engage in lobbying government agencies, fundraising efforts, and a big one here, listening to customers or other stakeholders. What do they like? What do they wish was different? What do they complain about? And here's the thing, we're not only listening here, but we're actually going to take the steps to rectify any wrongs. Are there shipping issues? Are there communication issues? Listening is only part of the solution. Finding ways in which to integrate and address this advice and complaints, that's the second part. Finally, think about planning promotional events, whether it's an open house or an information session. One thing I used to do when I worked in the healthcare setting is we do a large women's night out event in October. We held it at a great venue. We had excellent food. Vendors came in, makeup, perfume, meditation tips, massage. And then we'd bring in physicians to chat about health tips over dinner. We made some money for our oncology and our women's health departments, provided solid information, and promoted our people and facility, while also delivering an experience that was enjoyable for our participants. The final PR activity we're going to consider is a writing and delivering of speeches and presentations. This is essential. Speeches allow us to introduce ourselves, our ideas, and to form a connection with our audience. They allow us to provide information and leave our listeners with specific tips or directives or guidance. This is why we're going to focus on communication tips that help us establish and maintain our credibility. So now that we've reviewed just a few of the PR-related communication activities leaders engage in directly, oversee, and collaborate on, with these in mind, we're going to consider how leaders and their teams can use these tactics and others to create campaigns. When we have these campaigns, we're thinking of how to connect with larger groups of stakeholders or constituents. So what should leaders be mindful of when planning persuasive campaigns? What will help to set them up for success? Some of my colleagues in the communication field conducted research with PR directors, CEOs, and employees at 300 companies across the United States, Canada, and Great Britain. They found some excellent tips for us. They found that excellent PR efforts, those that led to increased organizational effectiveness and other societal benefits, they shared some similar characteristics. So we're going to review some of those. One, I want you to think about strategic management role. So remember, my friends, back to when we did an episode where we compared leaders to managers. Here we see the importance of management. We're talking about insight. We're talking about foresight. Having what your team needs now, but predicting and planning for future needs. This also includes problem solving, budgeting, setting expectations, and policies. Also, beneath strategic management, strong leaders are engaged in issues management. So what's issues management? This refers to this ongoing process of monitoring the environment for developments, right? So are these things in the society that are going to pose a threat, or maybe they're going to present an opportunity to the organization? And in the case of a threat or a concern arises, responding in a communicative, audience-centered way. Public leaders are very attuned to what is happening in their community and related communities and at various other levels, whether it's local, regional, or national. What else is part and parcel of effective PR? Two-way communication. What we mean here is that outstanding leaders and organizations engage in conversation with stakeholders. They don't talk at them or just communicate at them. Conversation is essential. It encourages dialogue. When we have dialogue, we can start to build relationships. This allows us to get to know our audiences, ask them about their needs. What else can we develop to help you, to make your life easier or better? Ask them what they love about our products and services, and also ask them what can be improved. Strong PR efforts are ethical. We disclose relevant information even when it doesn't put us in the best light or align with our immediate goals. For example, what if we realize we have a contaminated field and we've sold some veggies from it? Maybe we realize some of our animals grazed in this field and this problem has gotten bigger. But here's the thing, if we hope no one becomes ill or if we take a wait and see approach, what will that do to the relationships we have with our vendors, with our customers, with our employees? As you've heard many times before on The Communicative Leader, distressing news can be palatable if it is delivered in a way that is tactful and in a timely manner. If you take the wait and see approach, not only is that breaching ethical guidelines, but it is damaging the relationships that you have worked so hard to foster with your stakeholders. The final defining aspect of successful PR campaigns is utilizing a relationship management lens. Oh, you're throwing another term at me is probably what you're thinking right now. Well, I guess yes, the answer is yes. But here's the thing, this is an important one. When we think about public leadership, even the title, it implies the relational role. The notion of leading the public encompasses the idea of engaging with a large group of constituents, doing work on the public's behalf, helping to lead change, to engineer communities and systems that are inclusive, that meet the needs of those they are intended to serve. So when we think of relationship management, there are a number of elements that are included. First element we're going to consider, and oh friends, how I love this one, control mutuality. So control mutuality, what does this entail? It means that both the organization and the public or publics it serves have a measure of control or influence over the other. This makes me think of the Starbucks boycott. 2018, if you don't remember, 2 Black men were arrested at a Philadelphia Starbucks for simply sitting in the cafe without ordering anything while they were waiting for a third person to arrive for a meeting. Although Starbucks CEO Kevin Johnson apologized in the days following, some people thought it was too little too late and called for the firing of the manager who called the police, in addition to an overall boycott of Starbucks stores. Well, what was the result? All Starbucks closed for an afternoon of racial bias training. More specifically, shortly after the incident, Starbucks announced that it was going to close 8,000 of its stores across the U.S. for an afternoon to provide this training for almost 200,000 employees. The company's founding values are based on humanity and inclusion, said Howard Schultz in a statement. We learn from mistakes and reaffirm our commitment to creating a safe and welcoming environment for everyone. Is this the best the company could do? Definitely not. But it was a step to attempt to repair the trust. Again, this leads us to another defining aspect of relationship management, trust. Trust or the confidence each party has in the other to be honest, to be transparent and forthcoming with the other. Another element of relationship management is satisfaction, right? The belief that the benefits of this relationship is stronger than the costs, that it outweighs the costs. So this can be as simple as why we select a certain grocery store over another. Is it worth it to maintain this relationship? Hand in hand with satisfaction comes commitment, right? So again, the idea this relationship is worth maintaining and continuing. This leads us to community involvement. Again, a benefit that goes both ways. Organizations benefit from being in communities, whether it is tax breaks or other financial incentives, to being in a like-minded liberal community, to also recognizing clear and direct benefits to that local area for hosting the organization. Finally, reputation. This one is more for the community, for external stakeholders. Do these groups see the organization as innovative, as effective, as financially sound? So again, my friends, leadership is synonymous with communication and relationships, whether we're leading a team of 3 or a country of 300 million. So we've looked at common PR-related activities that leaders engage in or oversee or take part in. We've also considered defining elements of successful PR campaigns and initiatives. Now I want us to think about how this all comes to play when we consider an aspect of public leadership, that of collaborative or integrative leadership. I know it sounds like I'm taking us on a tangent or down a rabbit's hole, but you'll see how the defining role of public leaders includes the ability to connect groups and organizations, to persuade them to share their resources and harness collective strengths to reach their audiences. This means communicating in a persuasive way that convinces others to look beyond their own immediate interests or their own individual goals. A textbook that I use in an undergrad leadership course uses the example of restoring salmon and steelhead in the Pacific Northwest. Billions of dollars have been spent to bolster these fish populations, but the numbers continue to decline, and this is due to dams, to overgrazing, urban pollution, logging, irrigation, fishing, among other factors. Public leaders have a lot of work to do to connect these vast groups of individuals and organizations and industry that are all involved in this issue. It is going to require cooperation from biologists, from government agencies, power companies, ranchers, barge owners, water districts, tribes, city councils, environmental activities, governors, and congressional representatives. I am tired just thinking about it, just verbalizing the extent of this issue. It is a good reminder of the daily complex and layered issues that land on public leaders' plates. Things can't be wiped off the to-do list easily or by their own individual efforts. Effective public leaders are also those who are collaborative or integrative, those who can connect stakeholders from various groups and bring these groups together, help them to see what they have in common, in addition to creating space for these conversations to happen. They might also use their role power to reward or otherwise incentivize these collaborations as well. When we think of collaborative leaders and communicative competencies they need to be successful, we can do that with 3 categories: attributes, skills, and behaviors. So let's look at attributes. When we have attributes of a collaborative leader, they're using, again, a collaborative mindset. They are relational in nature. They are passionate about the outcomes. They use a systems thinking approach. Again, what we talked about in our learning culture episode. They tend to be open to risk. And while this might not sound like something we usually associate with leadership at first glance, tend to have a large sense of humility and a sense of mutuality in terms of connectedness. When we think about skills, I want you to think about 3 things. I want you to think about having solid management skills, like we've chatted about, strategic thinking, and the ability to facilitate. Now, what goes into the ability to facilitate? And this one is really important because, again, we're thinking about bringing together groups from different organizations and agencies. In this sense, facilitation is helping a group to generate new ideas, helping them to manage conflict that comes up, helping them to keep moving if they get stuck in a particular discussion or cyclical thinking. This skill set also includes the ability to help these parties forge agreements. Now, when we look at behaviors, again, the last set of characteristics related to collaborative or integrative leaders, I want you to think about the ability to identify stakeholders. Who needs to be at the decision-making table? I want you to think about strategic issue framing. So how to advocate for issues, create a sense of urgency, and use communication to focus everyone's attention on specific problems. These behaviors also include relationship development, right? No surprise there. The ability to pull together working groups and facilitate a learning process. So I think you're seeing a lot of similarities here with our learning leader episode as well. You also need to be helpful at inducing commitment. So again, using your persuasive powers to show people how this is a shared issue or a shared goal and that it's going to be better if we work together, and leads us to facilitating trusting relationships among our partners. So when we think about these collaborative or integrative leaders, they've been described as catalysts, like agents that speed up chemical reactions. They foster this integration. So to recap, this charge placed on public leaders, the collaborative, integrative aspect, it is hard, it is complex, it is fraught with frustration and challenges, but it can bring about immense amounts of good to a community. Think about the example we were talking about in the Pacific Northwest of restoring salmon and steelhead. The benefits far outweigh costs, though this role is often thankless and often invisible as well. I didn't leave that one sounding all that sexy. I get it, but come on, the amount of good that comes out of public leaders who take a collaborative, integrative approach to their communities, it really is remarkable. So what have we done so far today? 1, we've looked at common PR tools and activities that leaders engage in. 2, we've reviewed some hallmarks of successful PR campaigns. And 3, we've unpacked relationship management and considered what it takes to demonstrate collaborative or integrative leadership. But before we go, my friends, I want us to think about some communication behaviors that are linked to credibility. First, I want you to know that credibility is perceptual. That is why some of us might see a candidate as intelligent and capable, and others might be looking at the same person and thinking their behavior resembles a chimpanzee. Again, credibility is in the eyes of the beholder. It is something to keep in mind because whereas we can be intentional with our communication behaviors, and because someone else has different beliefs or comes from a different background, there is nothing we can do to convince them of our ideas or of our plan. Also, when we talk about credibility, we often do so like it was just a single dimension, just a package, so to speak. But credibility is composed of many factors. And yes, we're going to look at those in a moment. What else? Credibility is situational. Someone who is a board member of the NRA may be seen as a pillar of knowledge and expertise at those meetings. And that makes sense, right? Though, if that same leader came to a PETA or another animal rights group, they're likely to be seen as cruel and uninformed. Finally, credibility is dynamic. So what does this mean? It means that while we may be seen as credible one day, after a faux pas, then our ratings can tank. Looking at celebrities who've fallen from grace for their comments or their behaviors, credibility is dynamic. But on the flip side, since it is dynamic, this also means we can take steps to reestablish or rebuild our credibility. So now that we have this working idea of what credibility is, now we consider what goes into it. So I wanted to walk us through 3 primary and 3 secondary dimensions of credibility. So first, the primary. 1, expertise or competence. Do you actually have the knowledge and the skills? Can you walk the walk and not just talk the talk? 2, trustworthiness. Also thinking about your character and integrity here. You as the speaker, you as the leader, you need to be able to convey honesty, dependability, and safety. 3rd primary dimension, goodwill or perceived caring. Demonstrating a genuine interest in the audience, the stakeholders, saying things like, I hear where you're coming from. I can relate to that. Or I can sympathize with how you feel. So all of this makes sense, right? Expertise or knowledge, trustworthiness, and demonstrating genuine interest or care. So what about the secondary dimensions? We have dynamism, also known as extroversion, the source of energy, enthusiasm, motivation, inspiration, aligning with some of the traits that we've linked with leaders and learning leaders in particular. The secondary dimension we're going to look at, composure or poise, the ability to model remaining calm and collected, especially under pressure. I think about Captain Sully, who landed on his plane on the Hudson River, when I think about this particular dimension. And finally, sociability, friendliness, likability. Are you someone I want to talk with? Are you warm? Do you demonstrate those immediacy behaviors, some charm? This might not seem important at first glance. Why do I need to be likable? If your people don't want to approach you, if they don't feel comfortable sharing with you, we can cut off their creativity. We can minimize the communication channels they use to share ideas, to pass along information, to help the team grow. This factor is really important in industries like education, social work or counseling, sales, and law. So now we understand what credibility is, how it operates, and the dimensions that compose it. Now I want to leave you with some suggestions for how to enhance your credibility. These suggestions are helpful in the interview setting, when you're pitching a new client, or when you're presenting to peers or other departments. So 1, do your homework, right? Prepare thoroughly. Don't wing it. I'm not suggesting you memorize a script. No robots here. But be prepared. Know the content. Practice or rehearse potential responses to questions. This allows you to demonstrate your composure, your knowledge, and do so in a fluent manner. I want you to also think about how to cite evidence or other source qualifications. So whether you're bringing in national studies, demographic data, or quoting others, tell your audience where this information is coming from. This one here, this does double duty for us, folks. It not only explicitly shows your audience that you have done your homework and that you're knowledgeable, but it also helps to reiterate and substantiate your points. This isn't just my opinion or my suggestion. It is based on empirical evidence. This can be really helpful when people are passionate about different options or ideas, showing them it isn't necessarily a personal suggestion, but one that is data-backed as well. Just as we're going to cite evidence, we're also going to apply this to ourselves. We're going to state our own background. We're going to own our expertise. Demonstrate that you know what you're talking about this. And do this early in the interview or the presentation. I might say something like, as a PhD in organizational communication. Someone else might say, as a seasoned project manager. Someone else might say, as a trainer who has 10 former clients who are at a professional level. Again, thinking in this way and speaking in this way allows you to immediately establish credibility. I also want you to think about having a high credibility source introduce you or endorse your project. If you're giving a speech, making sure you have someone the audience knows and respects introduce you, that's going to go a long way, my friends. If you're quarterbacking a big project, having a C-suite member endorse it, bingo. When we read books, we often see forewords or introductions from other prominent names in the field. Again, they're using this idea here. When we think about credibility, I also want you to think about building trust. I want you to think about how you can identify with your audience. Using audience-centered language, things like we and us and our, I want you to consider how to emphasize those similarities, your common values, and your shared goals. Similarly, I'd like you to think about how to demonstrate goodwill. How do you show them you care? Find ways to illustrate you have their interests at heart. On an interview, you might come in with a potential new webpage created or a brochure, something to show you are invested, something to show that you know who they are and you're ready to be part of that team. If it's a speech at a city meeting, saying things like, my kids go to these schools too, it goes a long way. The last one I want to leave you with is avoiding powerless language. If you want a refresher, check out Season 1, Episode 1, because we go over powerless language comprehensively. But in short, take your time. Try to remove the vocal fillers, the ums, the yas, the likes. Again, easier said than done. In that first episode, I use and I kept it in there to show that, yes, even when you are talking about powerless language, you can inadvertently use powerless language. It is far better to ask for a moment to think about a response or say something like, great question, I need to think about this and I'll circle back, instead of engaging in a series of gosh, as you gather your thoughts. As usual, we have talked about a lot today and hopefully had some fun doing so. My formal leaders out there, especially my public leaders, thank you for your work. This is an especially challenging type of leadership, and as we've said, often a thankless one. Keep the integrative and collaborative skills in mind and keep focused on the end goal. You have communication tips, and these skills can always be sharpened. You've got this. all of my friends out there, all ranks, all industries, I would really like you to think about two things in particular. I'd like you to think about relationship management and credibility. Even if you're not in a formal leadership role and not even interested in one, relationships form the foundation of our lives. Whether it's with our partner, our kids, our extended families, our neighbors, our peers, taking a step back to view these associations through a communicative lens, it's going to help you to strengthen these relationships, to focus your attention on communicating in intentional and audience-centered ways. When our relationships are in good places, solid places, that frees us up for everything else in our lives, to create, to have fun, to focus. But when these relationships are unsteady or unstable or crumbling or especially trying, well, it's hard to stay present. Credibility is huge too. Trying to be mindful of powerless language, owning your qualifications and accomplishments, making time to prepare. These are small things on their own, but the more we practice these skills, the more we integrate them into our routines, the stronger you're going to feel, the more professional you will feel, the better you will feel. On the next episode of The Communicative Leader, Season 1 finale, Episode 15, it's going to focus on the highlights from the previous 14 episodes. Is it presumptuous to do a best of after 14 episodes? You betcha, my friends, but we are going to do it. We have chatted about a lot of important things. We've reviewed so many tangible steps you can take to make your work life what you want it to be. So we will review the highlights together before taking a break to strategize for Season 2. All right, my friends, that wraps up our conversation today. Until next time, communicate with intention and lead with purpose. I'm looking forward to chatting with you again soon on The Communicative Leader.